Good morning, everyone. I'm Wayne Bushy, and welcome to today's lecture for our undergraduate survey course, America in the Cold War Era. Today's presentation is titled The Rosenberg Case in American Justice. We're continuing our examination of the second Red Scare of the McCarthyism era, and today we're going to focus on one of the most controversial legal cases of the early Cold War period. In June 1953, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were executed for conspiracy to commit espionage. The case divided the American public opinion then, and it continues to generate debate among historians today. This lecture builds on our previous discussion of Cold War origins and domestic anti-communism. As we examine this case, think about how the fears we discussed last week about Soviet infiltration played out in the American courtrooms and public consciousness. To understand why the Rosenberg case became so controversial, we need to remember the atmosphere in the 1950s. The Soviet Union had successfully tested an atomic bomb in 1949, which sooner than American officials expected. This shocked the American public and government officials as well. We had believed the United States would maintain a nuclear monopoly for years to come. Soon after, in February 1950, British physicist Klaus Fuchs confessed by passing atomic secrets to Soviets while working in the Manhattan Project. His confession led investigators to other suspected spies, including David Greenglass, who worked at Los Alamos during the war. When arrested, Greenglass named his brother-in-law, Julius Rosenberg, as the person who recruited him into Soviet espionage. Julius was arrested in 1950, and his wife Ethel was arrested a month later. The government charged them with conspiracy to commit espionage, claiming they led a spy ring that passed vital atomic secrets to the Soviet Union. The timing was crucial, as Senator Joseph McCarthy was making headlines with his accusations about communism in government. Here was an actual espionage case involving atomic secrets and American citizens. Now, this was where the case becomes historically complex and controversial. The prosecution's case relied heavily on testimony from David Greenglass and his wife Ruth, both of whom had pleaded guilty and were cooperating with the government. David testified that Julius recruited him to steal information from Los Alamos, and that Ethel helped by typing up stolen documents. But there was a problem with the testimony that raised questions then and continues to raise questions today. David Greenglass was clearly trying to save himself and his wife from prosecution. The physical evidence was limited, and some of the technical information allegedly passed already known to scientists worldwide. Here's where it gets really interesting, though. From a historical perspective, in 1995, the United States government declassified a series of intercepted Soviet communications called the Venona decrypts. This intercept dates back to the 1940s, were decoded by American intelligence but kept secret for decades. The Venona documents confirmed that Julius Rosenberg was indeed in Soviet espionage. However, they also revealed something about Ethel that was crucial. The intercept suggested that she knew of Julius's activities, but there was no clear evidence. She was an active participant in espionage. David Greenglass later admitted in interviews that he lied about Ethel typing up stolen documents to protect his own wife. This raises fundamental questions historians grapple with. How do we assess historical events when critical evidence emerges 50 years later? The decision to seek the death penalty created enormous controversy. Julius and Ethel Rosenberg became the first American citizens executed for espionage during peacetime. Many people, both in America and internationally, argued this punishment was excessive. The judge, Irving Kaufman, in the case, justified the death sentence by claiming the Rosenbergs had given the atomic bomb to the Soviets and were therefore responsible for the Korean War and future deaths in any potential nuclear conflict. The reasoning troubled many legal experts, who argued the judge was holding the defendants responsible for broad geopolitical consequences rather than their specific crimes. Protests erupted worldwide. Pope Pius the 12th appealed for clemency. Albert Einstein and other prominent Americans petitioned President Eisenhower to commute the sentences. Thousands gathered outside the White House and at Sing Sing prison, where the execution took place. The government refused all appeals. Officials argued that showing mercy would encourage other spies and demonstrate weakness during the Cold War. They maintained stealing atomic secrets warranted the ultimate punishment, regardless of how much information was actually passed. This controversy reveals a central tension of the Cold War era. How far would democratic society go to protect itself from the perceived threats? This question would resurface repeatedly throughout the Cold War period. Another controversial aspect of the case involved allegations of anti-Semitism. The Rosenbergs and their supporters argued they were victims of prejudice as Jewish Americans. They claimed the government was scapegoating them because of their ethnicity and left-wing political beliefs. This argument is historically complicated. Judge Kaufman, who sentenced them to death, was himself Jewish. The prosecutor, Irvin Sapol, was also Jewish. However, this doesn't necessarily negate the possibility of anti-Semitism influencing this case. We need to consider this in broader context. During this period, some Americans associated with Jews and communism, drawing on anti-Semitic stereotypes about Jewish radicalism. The defense argued that this prejudice affected how the case was prosecuted and how the public viewed the defendants. Historians continue to debate this aspect of the case. What's clear is that the Rosenbergs' Jewish identity became part of the public discussion, whether as a factor of their prosecution or their support. This reflects complex ways that ethnicity, politics, and Cold War fears intersected in the 1950s America. The Rosenberg case illustrates several important themes. We'll see through the Cold War era. First, it demonstrates a tension between civil liberties and national security and would persist for decades. How did democratic societies protect themselves from abandoning their core values? Second, it shows Cold War fears shaped American legal and political institutions. The case occurred within the broader context of loyalty, oaths, blacklists, and congressional investigations that characterized the McCarthy era. Third, it reveals public opinion and media coverage influencing legal proceedings. This case was tried not just in a courtroom, but in the newspaper, on the radio, and in public demonstrations. This foreshadowed later controversies where legal cases became public spectacles. The Rosenberg case remains controversial, and it raises fundamental questions about justice, evidence, and the proper response of national security threats. As we move forward in our course to examine the Eisenhower presidency and the continuing Cold War, consider how the atmosphere of suspicion and fear demonstrated in the case influenced American democratic and foreign policy. The questions raised by this case didn't end in 1953. Throughout the Cold War, Americans continued to struggle with balancing security, concerns against civil liberties and due process. From Vietnam War protests to debates over surveillance in the 1970s, these tensions remain central to American political life. For next week, as we examine Eisenhower's foreign policy, think about how domestic fears of communism influenced America's approach to international relations. How do cases like the Rosenbergs affect how Americans viewed communists and that threat abroad? Thank you for your attention today. I look forward to continuing our exploration of the Cold War in America in our next session.